Hello all, my name is Priyadarshan Patil. I'm your trainer at V4 Infotech. So today I'm going to show you how to install SQL Server, SQL Server Management Studio and Visual Studio. So in order to install SQL Server, first we need to download the SQL Server development edition and the file for the installation. So in order to download, you need to go to the provided URL to you. So once you go to that URL, you're going to see the various options in order to install SQL Server on premises, like SQL Server on Azure, SQL Server at Edge, SQL Server on premises. This is what, if you are going to install on your own system, this is the options we need to consider. But again, when it's come to SQL Server, there are different editions available for installation and downloading, like Developer, Express, and Enterprise. Okay. So here we are going to install the developer edition. So please install the developer edition because that is the most important, which is going to give you access for your lifetime. So click on download button and install it. Once you download it, it will get downloaded into your system. So I have already downloaded it here. And then what I will do is I will install it from here. Okay. So once you download that file, what you do is you just right click on it and then run it as an administrator. Okay. So once you do it, you get three options here: basic, custom, and download the media. Okay, so we already downloaded. I'm not going to go with the basic options because we have to select certain features and then as well as certain component of SQL Server. So I will select here custom installation. Okay, so it is telling us that okay, this is where the target location is going to be there. Okay, that's fine. Let's click on install. Okay, so our installation will get start. Now, because we selected the custom, now we have to select various options for the installation. Okay, so if you're not sure about whether your system is going to handle the SQL Server installation or not, or whether your system meet the minimum requirement for your SQL Server installation, you can check it from here. Okay, so what I will do is I will directly go to the installation here. Okay, because we are installing the fresh instance of SQL Server, I will select here new SQL Server standalone installation. It will look for any update. Then I will click on next. So now it is going to install the setup file for us. Okay, once the setup files are installed, we are going to be on next tab that is called installation rules. So here some installation rules has been checked by SQL Server, from minimum requirements, some limitation. We can ignore firewall settings because we are not going to access the SQL Server over the internet. So we can ignore the firewall settings here. So make sure that here developer is selected. If you have installed the developer edition, so developer you should select here. Don't select Express or yeah. The reason you should not select Express or other option there because then Express is not going to have all the features which is required for the training. Developer edition is like exactly like enterprise edition. So enterprise has all the features available in SQL Server. So exactly developer is a copy of the enterprise version. The only thing is developer edition you can't install or you can't deploy it in production. So it is for development purpose, it is for testing purpose, it is for learning purposes, and you get access lifetime free. So it's pretty good to install a developer edition. Then accept the license here. And then once we are here, we need to select whatever features is required for our installation. So I will select here database engine. Then we don't need all like machine learning R, Python, Java because we're not going to work with it. We're not going to work with analysis services. Then so definitely I need integration services. I'm going to work with integration services here. And after that, all these options. Client, like you have to install all the client tools for connectivity purposes. We don't need a distributed relay controller and client, and then we don't need a master data services as well. if maybe I already have SQL Server Client Connectivity SDK installed, that's the reason by default it is selecting check. But if you see that it is not checked for you, you can check it and then click on next. So next it is going to show, like, if you want to give the name, your own name to SQL Server, you can give. I will stick to the default name. So this is a default instance. If you see already here the name instance, it means that you already have one more SQL Server installed. Okay, so I don't have any SQL Server installed here, so I will go for the default instance. So we need to give the permission for the various accounts. So we will stick to the default permission here. Then we will go to the next. Okay, so there are two types of authentication mode. How you want to get authenticated when you log in into SQL Server, either using Windows authentication mode, or you can come up with your own username and password. Okay, so we will go with the Windows authentication for training purposes. But yeah, when you go work, you will have always a mixed mode. So you will always enter username and password. So here we will go with the Windows authentication mode. So the reason I'm going for Windows authentication mode is because in training, we are going to connect the server multiple times from external application using Visual Studio. So I don't want you to every time type your username and password in order to get connected. So we will just select here Windows authentication, click on add current user. So it is going to add your current Windows user here. Then next. That's all. And then click on the installation. So installation is going to take some time. It's the installation timing vary based on how many GB of RAM is available, which server you have or which processor you have, whether you have a Intel i3, i5 or i7, or maybe now the next generation Intel CPUs. Okay, so I will pause here, and once the installation is continue, we will continue with the next step. Okay guys, so our installation is completed. So if you can see here, database engine services succeed, SQL browser, SQL writer, client tool connectivity and integration services, everything is successful. So what I will do is I will go ahead and then close this installation window. So once the installation of SQL Server is done, the next step we need to do is we need to access that SQL Server. So right now we have only installed the server, but there are two more components are pending to install. The next component which we are going to install is we need to access a SQL Server. So in order to access a SQL Server, we need to install the Management Studio. Okay, so install SQL Server. So I will click on SQL Server Management Studio installation. It will take you to the website. Once you go to that particular website, you download the latest version of SQL Server Management Studio, which I have already downloaded. So once you click on it, it is going to download that for you. So once we have it, again, the same thing I'm going to do is I'm going to right click on it and run as an administrator. Installation of SQL Server Management Studio is not going to take that much time. It is going to be a pretty quick process. Using SQL Server Management Studio, what you do is you are going to access the SQL Server. So you can run the various queries against a SQL Server database, against the SQL Server data. So now I will just click on the installation. And then installation has been started. It's not going to take much time. So let give the install a little bit of time. So guys, installation of SQL Server Management Studio is completed here. So I will just close it out. So once the Management Studio installation is completed, there are a few more installation we need to do. So what I will do is next, I will also install the SQL Server reporting services, which is very important for SQL Server training. But those who are going to attend the course for SQL Server like other than SQL Server, like business analyst, Power BI, Tableau, they don't need to install the SQL Server reporting services. SQL Server reporting services is only required for those who are going to attend the SQL Server developer course. So same thing we need to do. Once we click on that window, it is going to take us to the link from where we can install the SQL Server reporting services. So once I am there on that particular link, I have to just install the SQL Server reporting services from there. So I will just download the SQL Server 2019 reporting services. And once I click there, it will bring me here. So while it is getting installed, while it is getting downloaded, it's done. So what I will do is I will just click open here. I will click on install. Definitely here also I will select developer. Click next. Accept the license. Next, and then install. Okay, so while SQL Server reporting services is getting installed, so let's see what the management studio which we have installed, how to connect to SQL Server by using the management studio. So what I will do is I will just type here SSMS, and then I will get here SQL Server Management Studio. Okay, I will close this one. Oh, okay. So this is SQL Server Management Studio. So once the installation is done, you will see the server name, database engine, like because we selected at the time of Windows installation, and then we have to just hit the connect button. The moment you hit a connect button, you are inside the SQL Server environment. Okay. So once you're inside the SQL Server environment, there are three changes you guys have to do. Okay. The first one is like click on the new query window. Okay, so we have here something called Object Explorer. So using Object Explorer, you can see the various options here, like databases, all the databases which you have in SQL Server. So this is a default, like we just freshly install the Management Studio as well as SQL Server. So we don't have any database here. So as the training progress, we are going to create a various different databases here. Okay. But before we go ahead with the training, we need to make sure that our Management Studio is ready for the development. There are certain options we need to set here. So what I will do is I will go to tools. I will go to options. And here, like if you see, there are various options. So you can customize the Management Studio the way you want, like background color, the font size, and also if I go here, if you see the font size, suppose I want font size to be 12. Okay, so the font size is going to be 12. Then if you want anything in the bold, you can have in, like if you want bold or any other font, you can have those things in startup. So when you start the Management Studio, what you want, like which window should open. So what I want to do is I want like open Object Explorer window and the new query window. So this is Object Explorer and then new query. Okay. So as you start developing the code, you're going to do some mistakes, you're going to get some errors. So whenever you get errors, right, SQL Server is going to tell you that, okay, there is an error on line number 10, there is an error on line number 19, there is an error on line number 400. But if you see here on the query window, there is no line numbers. So line numbers are very important in order to troubleshoot. So what you do is you go to the text editor. In text editor, you select the transact SQL, and then you select a line number, as well as select the word wrap. So if you reach at the end of the screen, it will start the next line. Sorry, it will start the next keyword or whatever you're typing on the new line. Okay, so that is a word wrap. I will say okay here. And then if you see, we got a new line. So next time when you open a Management Studio, you're going to have Object Explorer as well as a new query window. Okay, so that's all about Management Studio. Now we will move towards the installation of SQL Server reporting services. So I will say here, configure the report server. I will say yes. Okay, so I will say connect. And then I will go to the database here. So by default, there is no database. Okay, so I will click here, change database. I will say here, create new report server database. I will keep everything default. That is your server name. Test connection succeeded. Okay. And then next, 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 next. And now it is going to create a databases. Like, so we will have two system databases, that is report server database and then report server 10DB database that is required for the SSRS training. So I will say finish. And now there are two more things we need to do. So I will go to the web service URL. And I will simply click on apply. So what it will do is it will create a web service URL for you. So when you are going to do the training on SSRS, this I will explain you how to use this URL on URL web service URL or report portal URL. So this is the URL which we need, and then we need one more URL. So same thing I'm going to do here is apply. Okay, so this is a setup which we have done. So I will say here close, exit. So in future, if you want to do the certain changes to report server configuration manager, you can just search for report server configuration manager. You can click on it. You can say yes. And then it will bring you to the same window where we have created a database or where we have done this changes. Okay, so I will say click. So that's about installing the report server, installing of SQL Server and then Management Studio. There is one more thing which is required for the SQL Server training, that is called Visual Studio. So in order to install the Visual Studio, you need to go to the provided URL. Once you go to that URL, you need to download the community version of Visual Studio 2019. So I already downloaded that. And then what I will do is I will right click and then I will run it as an administrator. So Visual Studio is only required for those who are going to work for those who are going to go for the training for SQL Server as a SQL Server developer. So those who are attending business analyst, Tableau, Power BI training, they don't require to install the Visual Studio. But if you want just to look around, you can install it. So this is we are in the process of installing the Visual Studio. Okay. So if you see the Visual Studio, the installation is done. So it is asking what all the other components you need to install. Okay. So it is showing a lot of components here, which needs to be installed. Almost 729 MB of the component. So we will just say here install while downloading. So we will say here install while downloading, and then I will say install. Okay, I will say add a workload. So add a workload means we need to select here which workload we need to add. Okay, so definitely we are going to work on SQL Server, so we don't need all this workloads. Okay, so what I will do is I will select a particular workload here. Let me close this one. Okay. Oh, I was on wrong window. Sorry. So I want to install the Visual Studio Community 2019 here. So I will just say here communities version. So let's install it. Okay, it is here. So we need to select one component, guys. Let me see what we need to install. Okay, so come to the individual component, and from here let's select okay, let's select SQL Server Data Tools, and also select ASP.NET Web Development Tools. Okay, and it will show you all the core components which is required. It will select those. Okay, and I will say here install. We need to have a workload also. Let's see. Let's select this workload here, ASP.NET and Web Development workload. Okay, we will do here other data storage component. What we will do is we will uncheck this one, and from individual component we don't need this one. Okay, so at least we will have less space. Okay, so workload I'm selecting here is the data storage only, and then I will say here install. So this installation definitely going to take a little bit of time. What I will do is let's the installation finish, and then I will show you how to come up, like how to add the additional components which we are required for the training. So we are almost at the end of the installation. If you can see here, downloaded 100% and installing 99%, and it is finishing up. So once the finishing up like installation is completed, we will go into the Visual Studio environment. And once we go into the Visual Studio environment, there are two extensions which we need to download in order to work with SQL Server reporting services and SQL Server integration services. So installation, uh, let's get it complete successfully. Then I will show you how to add and then if you see it's done, and then now Visual Studio is starting. What I will do is I will say here launch, and I will close this window. And then if you see here, the Visual Studio is launching. Okay. So it is asking me to sign in. Maybe I will do it later on. It will ask you to select one theme. So I'm going to select here the blue one. It is preparing for the first use. Okay. So once you are inside the Visual Studio, there are certain changes you need to do. So let it be like we're not going to do here anything. So we'll just say here continue without the code. So once I'm here, what you guys have to do is you have to go to the extension, then manage extension. And in manage extension here, search for, first I'm going to search for reporting. Okay. And then once you're done with the reporting, you see here Microsoft Reporting Services Project, download it. So Microsoft Reporting Services Project, that's the one we need to download. Okay, so once the downloading is done, okay, it will like we have to close the Visual Studio in order to complete the installation. But before I do that, I will also search for integration services. Okay, and then SQL Server integration services. I will click on download. Okay, it will take us to another website. The SQL Server data tool will get downloaded. So meanwhile, what I will do is that is getting downloaded. I will close it, and then I will close the Visual Studio environment. And if you see here, okay, this one is, I will say maybe the first time it was opening, so I will just click it. I will just close it, yeah. And now if you see that SSRS initialization, like it is installing that SSRS reporting services component for us, and it is downloading that SQL Server integration services component for Visual Studio for us. Okay, I will say here yes. Okay, so I will say here modify the signature, and then if you see here it says installing Microsoft reporting services projects. So it is installing into the Visual Studio community 2019. Okay, so my SQL Server reporting services extension installation is completed. Now I will go ahead and then install the data tools. I will say English, okay. Next, and then yes. That's it. This is the last step, and then once the installation is done, your Visual Studio is all set for SQL Server reporting services as well as for SQL Server integration services. That's all, guys. And then once the installation is done, when we start working on SQL Server reporting services and SQL Server integration services, I will show you how to use a Visual Studio and how to utilize this extension integration services and SSRS. Thanks, and good luck with your training. Thanks. Thank you, everyone.